Here's Mike McKee. Good morning, Mike.
Worth getting out of bed this morning, John. Look at this. 254,000 jobs were created in the month of September, the BLS says. The month of August revised up to 159,000 from 142,000. Remember, we had been talking about how we were seeing all the revisions go the other way. The unemployment rate falls to 4.1%. Call Stephen Stanley at Santander. He nailed that. He said that could happen. Average hourly earnings up 0.4 on the month, which is a surprise because this was a short month. The estimate was for 0.3. Average hourly earnings up 4%. So the labor union people got to be happy with this because they're getting paid more. 34.2 is the average work week. That goes down a tick. So something for them to be unhappy about. But the change in manufacturing payrolls down 7,000. Change in private payrolls 223,000. And that is certainly much higher than we saw from ADP on Wednesday. So on overall, a really strong payrolls report, which is not what anybody was really expecting. People thought maybe in some categories, but this is overall just really, really strong. And it'll raise questions about whether we're going to have an inflationary issue.
Mike McKee, that is a monster upside surprise. You've had an extra minute to take another look. What jumps out for you?
Well, here's the amazing thing is we were within 0.2% of getting a 4% unemployment rate. When you go out to 3 decimals, it was 4.051, down from 4.221. So that's a major move, and it does suggest that the labor market is a lot stronger than we anticipated. The level change in the labor force wasn't that big, 150,000, but employment in the household survey up by 430,000, while unemployment fell 281,000. So a really strong household survey produces an unemployment rate of 4.1% that is, for all intents and purposes, interchangeable with 4%.
I'm so glad that John went through it because I was just completely in shock, sitting here with my mouth open, trying to figure out how people could have gotten it so wrong. This was basically a report that nobody was expecting, even the most optimistic and bullish members on Wall Street. What could be accounting for how wrong people understood this to be? And the fact that every single person who we talked to who's looking at the underbelly of the employment market says there's stasis, there's churn, people aren't hiring. How do we understand this?
This is going to raise a lot of questions about where did all this growth come from and how did it slip under the radar. Now, a shout out to the folks at Bloomberg Economics who did produce a preview piece that noted that the home base data, which is a weekly report on hiring, had suggested a very strong employment report. And that, I guess, people put that aside and looked at both what's been happening in recent months and the QCEW revisions that we got and just the commentary that people aren't hiring, and they adjusted their formulas that way. But this is certainly higher than anybody anticipated. 220 was the high for us, and Wall Street was looking at a whisper number of 151. So you can see why there's some straight lines on those graphs right there.
Mike, Luke Hawa on Twitter goes, and that's what happens when the Fed cuts 50 basis points, folks. So what does this mean for the Fed? I mean, 50 clearly off the table, but potentially, could this mean no cut?
No, I think, and I would have said this going into this is not the most important jobs report since the last one, because we have one more before the next Fed meeting.
It's always until the next one.
And now with the port strike over, that one should be much cleaner. We still have the Boeing folks on strike. Maybe the administration can settle that one too. We know there will be an impact from the hurricane. Hurricane Francine hit during the reference week for September, but the BLS says there was no impact from the hurricane on the data. But there will be an impact from the Helene. And so we'll be able to look through that. But that one will really set the tone for the Fed, because if we're going to see 2 months of strength, then yeah, maybe they back off and wait a month, wait a meeting.